This week we're going to be looking at scientific and technical texts. Two kinds of nonfiction texts are scientific texts and technical texts. A scientific text informs readers about a science topic, such as how plants grow. A science textbook and an experiment are two examples of scientific texts. Any kind of reading that has to do with science would be a scientific text. There are also technical texts, and these give details about how something works or instructions on how to do something. I would call those instructional texts, where they're giving directions. Instructions for hooking up a video game console and a cookbook recipe are two examples of technical texts. Main idea and details. All scientific and technical texts have a main idea that tells what the text is mostly about. They also have supporting details that explain and back up the main idea. When the main idea tells how to do something, as in an experiment or a recipe, the details are the steps you follow. When the main idea shares the results of an experiment, the details explain what happened. Read this example text. Underline the main idea. What are the supporting details? So here's something that you're supposed to do, right? I expect there to be a screenshot of this slide in your slideshow, and there should be underlines and circles. My experiment showed that dark materials absorb or take in more heat than light ones. And this sounds interesting. To begin, I got two thermometers, a black cloth and a white cloth. Each thermometer measured 67 degrees Fahrenheit at the start of the experiment. Next, I wrapped one thermometer in the black cloth and one in the white cloth. Seems simple enough. Then I placed both cloths in the sunlight. After 1 hour, I checked the thermometers. The thermometer in the black cloth read 81 degrees Fahrenheit. The one in the white cloth read 77 degrees Fahrenheit. My experiment proved that dark materials absorb more heat than light ones. Now, what are you supposed to do with that paragraph? You're supposed to, having read or listened to it, underline the main idea. And then what are the supporting details? You could put stars next to supporting details that tell you what the main idea is, but you'll notice that it's mentioned at the beginning and at the end of the paragraph. And at the very end of the paragraph in science, this is something that we would call a conclusion. So what did the author of this experiment and this writing conclude from the experience of doing this experiment? Text structure. Text structure is how a text is organized. Here are some common ways authors organize scientific and technical texts. Steps in a process. Texts that explain how to do something show the steps in a process. So the experiment that we just read about on the previous slide was this. It said, first I got these materials, then I did this to the thermometers. After that, I checked the thermometers, right? You have to do things in order for it to work. Each step must be done in order or the process won't work as planned. Numbers, bullets, and time order words can show the order of steps. Look back at the experiment with the thermometers. How does the author show steps in a process? You could even write 1, 2, 3, 4. And when you're getting ready to write a scientific text, if you're using steps in a process, you definitely want to write 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Like, make it in order, and maybe even next to the words, write your sequence words. Another way scientific text can be structured is whole to part. A whole to part text structure starts with the main idea or the whole. The supporting details are the parts. What is the whole in the paragraph below? What are the parts? A bicycle is a simple machine, so this is something that you're going to be doing. A bicycle is a simple machine. The body of a bicycle is the frame. Attached to the frame are a seat, handlebars, wheels, and pedals. To make a bicycle move, riders push down on the pedals. The pedals turn a chain connected to the rear wheel. This reminds me of the text history of the bicycle. Imagine someone who's never seen a bicycle before, has no idea what they are, but wants to learn about this thing that you keep talking about wanting to ride after school. This paragraph gives somebody who's completely ignorant to bicycles an idea of what they could potentially be and look like. Problem and solution. In texts organized by problem and solution, authors state a problem and suggest ways to solve it. Here's something for you to do. Circle the problem in the paragraph below. Underline the solution. Hiccups can be a problem. This is not going to be hard for you to do. But remember, you're supposed to circle the problem and then underline the solution. Hiccups can be a problem. One solution is to breathe into a paper bag. Hold the end of the paper bag around your mouth as you breathe. This sounds like an instructional text. Cause and effect is another way text can be structured. When authors use cause and effect, they explain what happens and why. The words because, since, and as a result can signify cause and effect. We've heard of cause and effect quite a lot, and it's good to practice these things, practice identifying these types of things. So you're asked here to underline the cause and circle the effect. Try as best you can to follow these directions appropriately and do the right thing. You might have to look back at the directions in order to do it just right. Heavy rains caused the river to rise and overflow. As a result, the streets flooded. So it actually seems like there's a couple effects here. The river rose, and then it overflowed, and then because of that, the streets flooded. So it's kind of like this happened, then this happened, then this happened, and it all came from the heavy rains. That would be the cause, right? Spatial. The word spatial means relating to space. We're not talking about outer space here. We're talking about space as in like area, right? The space within the confines of the theme or the main idea. A spatial text structure organizes details by the space they take up. Text about layers of soil may use the signal words top, middle, and bottom to describe the different layers. Other spatial words include north, south, left, and right. I included this diagram here of showing how the seasons of the earth, how they work. And you have to show that the earth is tilted, and you'd have to use words like southern hemisphere, northern hemisphere, and what direction that the earth is turning in. All of these are spatial ideas. Graphic organizers. A scientific and technical text, often they include graphic organizers. A graphic feature is a visual aid that helps readers understand information. Here are some examples of graphic features found in scientific and technical texts. And these you could, if you still have it, your mini book, your Intro to Locating Information mini booklet, you could write these and into that page, and this is what that page was all about. A diagram is a drawing that shows the parts of something or how something works. In the example below, labels name some parts of an insect. And there you see a flying insect. It looks like a housefly. And the head is labeled, the thorax is labeled, the abdomen is labeled. A diagram is like a teaching tool. A flow chart is a chart that shows the steps in a process. So you actually visualize the sequence of events, right? The flowchart below tells how some mud wasps build their nests. And here's an image of a mud wasp and its nest. The female mud wasp finds a place for a nest, such as on a building wall. She rolls bits of mud into balls. She uses the mud balls to build a tube-shaped nest on the wall. She puts dead insects into the nest, lays her egg, and seals the nest with mud. She adds chambers for more eggs, so there can be multiple tubes, right? And actually, as it turns out, sometimes they may be dead, but more often than not, they're paralyzed because the mud wasp uses special chemicals to keep the insects that are inside these mud tubes alive, just enough for the larvae to eat the paralyzed, oftentimes spiders. It's pretty wild stuff. The table on the left shows information in columns and rows. A graph shows information in a visual way. The bar graph on the right shows the same facts as the table. How does the graph make it easy to see the different plant types? So here you have plant height in inches. And I can't believe they have inches, because when you're talking science, it's always centimeters. They only use metric. But you might be more familiar with inches. That's probably why they're using it. Plant 1, 4 inches. Plant 2, 2.5 inches. Plant 3, 3.5 inches. Plant 4, 4 inches. So there's a couple plants that have the same height, right? 4 inches for plants 1 and 4. Well, check it out. Over here, you can see that easily. And you can easily and quickly see that plant 2 is the shortest without even having to put the numbers in order in your mind. So that's why it's helpful to visualize things. And in science, you want to show information. Okay, language spotlight. And this is pretty interesting. Like historical texts, scientific and technical texts can have domain-specific vocabulary, or words that relate to a topic. Even if you recognize a word, its meaning may be different when it is used with a particular topic. Use context clues, a glossary, or a dictionary to help you determine the meaning of domain-specific words. And when you're reading within a domain or about a particular topic, you're going to come across these words over and over and over again, and they always mean the same thing, and you get used to it. And then you start talking to somebody about the main idea of scientific topics, and using some of these words, and they're like, what are you talking about? So you have to clarify in your reading, and when you're talking to other people, these kinds of words, they're often homonyms, so they mean a few different things, multi-meaning words. But you can figure out what they mean if you use context clues. Here's something for you to do. Read the paragraph, underline domain-specific words that name and tell about Earth's layers. Use context clues or dictionary to figure out what the words mean. So these are kind of funny words because you typically don't see them in science, and here you go. Earth is made up of different layers. Well, that's not that strange. You've probably heard of that. The surface is the crust. Now, where have you heard that term? Especially around the holidays, eating pies, right? It is made up of rock. Beneath the crust is the mantle. You may not be familiar with this, but mantle is, there's actually a couple of meanings of the word, but the most common one is what you'd see over a fireplace mantle. The mantle contains hot, melted rock. Next comes the outer core. The core I think of is the core of an apple, right? It is made up of melted iron and nickel.